Let me show you what I consider to be a standard set of spindle turning tools. Of course, everybody who's done turning develops their own preference in tools, and soon their own tools just seem totally comfortable and natural, and somebody else's tools will seem awkward and difficult. But here's what I consider to be a basic set of spindle turning tools. All of these are available, but don't hesitate to try to make your own, and don't hesitate to make your own handles, especially if you're going to be a turner. You can definitely turn your own handles. Here we have a roughing out gouge. It's a big wide gouge, but it's cut square across the top. This is used for making square blanks into round blanks. Then I use usually two other gouges. A 1/2 inch gouge, and you can see that this is ground into a thumbnail shape. And I use probably a 5/16 gouge. It's also ground into a thumbnail shape. These two thumbnail gouges are used to make concave shapes. I like to use two different skews. Skews are made for making convex shapes. This is, I would say, maybe a 5/8 inch skew. I especially like to use a small skew. This is probably 5/16 inch. These are a little hard to find, but you can make your own out of a piece of 5/16 square carbon steel stock. I find that a small skew is much easier to use for making the little tiny beads you very often find on balusters and table legs. Then I use two different types of parting tools. This is a commercial parting tool. I don't know the name of it, but they're very good for, it's got a flute down one side and the other side is cut off flat. These parting tools are tapered. This edge is thicker than this edge, which means that they don't bind in a cut. I use these to cut square to round, for example, where the turn part of a baluster meets the square part of a baluster. There are other ways to do that, to make that cut, and I'm going to show you how to do that with the skew too. And then I use a parting tool like this. This is a diamond-shaped parting tool. These are used to make caliper measurements, to cut into a certain diameter with a caliper, and they're also used to true up the lands, the flat lands on turnings. Lands normally occur, as you know, between a bead and a cove. Sometimes, but not always, I use a straight tool too, almost like a square skew. I primarily use it for cutting dowels on the bottoms of balusters to go into drilled holes on square treads. Of course, these tools are worthless if they're not sharp, but I try not to get turning tools too sharp. Usually I hone them with a India stone or kind of a medium slit stone. Probably once a day I might take them to the grinder and true up the edge, but you can actually sharpen them with a slipstone every 3 or 4 balusters, and that's enough. And that's a good sharp that stays for a long time. If you try to make them too sharp, they'll cut very differently when they're sharp and only a little sharp. So I think that using an India stone like this is a very good way to touch up your carving tools. These tools are hollow ground, and as soon as I lose the hollow, I'll take them back to the grinder and resharpen them. But until I do that, I just sharpen them with my slipstone. First, I'm going to sharpen the bevel on this chisel. I push my stone against the tool so it's resting on both the heel and the toe of the bevel. And I can see the oil being wiped off the tool onto the flat part, off the stone onto the flat part of the tool. And that's probably enough every 3 or 4 balusters. And then I hone the inside of the tool, being very careful to stay on the flat of the tool so I don't put an extra bevel on there. And that's probably all it needs. Then I'll sharpen the skew in the same way. Nice and flat on the bevel. And I also sharpen the bottom, hone the bottom and the top of the skew also. That small skew thing, it's like, that's a hard tool to find because it's really, really useful. I don't know what else you would use to, but you don't see them in the catalogs. Most skews are really huge, way too big to use. You're also going to need a set of at least 4 calipers, a good sturdy awl, a dead blow hammer, and get one that's gray, not black, because the black ones leave marks on the wood. And I really find a dial caliper useful, one that reads in 64ths.